Joju and I had been husband and wife for a lifetime, yet he had always harbored a secret love in his heart that he dared not speak of. On his deathbed, he confessed to me that he had married me only because he could not bear to see me, whom he regarded as his younger sister, suffer in the bitter cold frontier. If there were an afterlife, he wanted to be a little selfish and follow only his own heart. His last wish came true. I was reborn with all my memories intact. And I turned down his invitation to go watch the lanterns together. At the Lantern Festival, he fell head over heels for Chen Yuyao at first sight. If he hadn't had to carry me to the medical clinic after I twisted my ankle, he wouldn't have been a step late in getting to know Chen Yuyao, one step behind, and every subsequent step would be delayed. This time, I would not stand between him and Chen Yuyao. I hoped he could have his heart's desire. Are you really not coming? The streets are bustling with excitement. The young man who insisted on inviting me had bright eyes, like stars twinkling in the sky. Under his hopeful gaze, I still shook my head. I want to stay home and practice the qin. You go by yourself. The light in Joju's eyes dimmed a little, but he did not press further. All right then, I'll bring you something delicious when I come back. He turned and left, his back brimming with the vigor of youth. As I watched his figure disappear beyond the door, I recalled his rambling words on his deathbed. That fleeting glance at Chen Yuyao at the Lantern Festival was the part he cherished most in his long final words. Just mentioning it would make the tenderness and longing overflow in his eyes. But when he spoke of me twisting my ankle, a shadow would cloud his face. He could not bring himself to leave me stranded, and that had become his eternal regret for not meeting Chen Yuyao first, that night. I lay awake the whole night, torturing myself by replaying every moment I had spent with Joju, every time he had shown me affection, every carefully prepared gift he had given me, every time he had spaced out in silence, every time he had unconsciously avoided my touch. His last words to me were, "Choo-choo, I do not regret saving you, but if only I had never married you." The first light of dawn streamed through the window. I dug out the last piece of decaying flesh from the depths of my heart. When Joju did not bring me any treats as he had promised, I did not go looking for him either. We fell into a tacit understanding, as if we had never known each other at all. I spent more and more time helping father organize his books and assisting mother in tending to her flowers and plants. Mother found it odd that I no longer followed Joju around everywhere. She asked me if I had quarreled with him. I threw myself into her arms and acted coquettishly. The long mist scent of her made my eyes well up with tears. "I just want to spend more time with you and father. Why is mother trying to push me away?" Mother stroked my head and laughed. "That's true, Choo-choo, you've come of age. Once you marry, you won't be able to stay with me anymore." I bit my lip, and the tears that spilled wet her lapel. "Then I won't marry at all." "Nonsense," Mother chided gently, unaware of the turmoil in my heart. She brought up Joju again. "You like Adu, don't you? His mother asked me just the other day if we had any intention of arranging a marriage between you two. You two children have been close since you were little. It's only because I couldn't bear to let you leave home that I didn't agree right away." "Did you and Adu quarrel over this?" I mumbled in reply. "No, Joju and I never talked about getting married, and I don't want to marry him either." Mother's hand, which had been resting on my back, froze. She cupped my face in her hands, and her confused gaze stilled when it met my tearful eyes. Her expression turned worried, and she dabbed at my tears with a handkerchief. "Did that rascal bully you? I'll go over to his house and teach him a lesson." I held her hands and shook my head. "It has nothing to do with Joju. I just had a nightmare while napping, and when I woke up, I missed you so much. I only want to stay with you and father." Safe and sound, Mother smiled helplessly. "Silly girl, no daughter can stay with her parents forever. My darling is such a good girl. How could you not find a husband? Even if you don't marry Joju, there are plenty of talented young men who will come to propose. We can take our time to choose the best one for you." "All right." The door creaked open as father returned, dressed in his official robes. He echoed Mother's words. "That's right. We won't marry you off to Joju. Father knows many fine young men in the court. I'll bring them over for you to meet someday." I looked at father. His brows were slightly furrowed, as if he were angry, but when he met my gaze, he forced a smile. Mother stood up to fetch him some casual clothes to change into. I quietly stepped out and closed the door behind me, lingering outside instead of leaving right away. Father had never talked about my marriage before. He had always wanted me to stay home as long as possible. But today he had taken the initiative to suggest introducing me to other suitors. Soft whispers of conversation drifted out from behind the door. "I'm just trying to comfort Choo-Choo. Why are you so angry? You used to think highly of that boy from the Wen family, didn't you? He's intelligent and treats Choo-Choo well." After Mother finished speaking, Father's voice rang out, tinged with anger. "How can you still think of that boy? Do you have any idea what he's been up to these past few days? That boy laid eyes on a girl at the Lantern Festival. It's only been a few days, and he's already begged old man when to go propose marriage to her. Has he even spared a thought for our daughter?" Mother fell silent. I lowered my eyes and walked away from my parents' bedroom. So that was it, without me standing in his way. When Joju moved so quickly when he fell for someone. Those 16 years we had spent growing up together meant nothing to him. He had truly never liked me. In the evening, Mother came to see me, her eyes slightly red. She forced a smile and listened to me play the cheen, song after song, before asking cautiously, "Choo-Choo, do you really not like Wen Joju anymore?" I nodded calmly. "I really don't. I only see Wen Joju as a childhood friend." Mother let out a sigh of relief, yet her eyes reddened even more. She turned her head away and wiped her eyes with a handkerchief, then turned back to me, her voice thick with suppressed sobs. "Then, how about Mother arranges some matchmaking meetings for you? We've known the Wen family for years, so we didn't have to rush before. But now, if we're going to find a good husband for you, we must choose carefully." I wanted to refuse, to tell Mother I never wanted to marry anyone. But looking at her red-rimmed eyes, I nodded silently in agreement. Mother smiled and patted my head, then left my room. The next afternoon, Mother brought me a stack of portraits of eligible young men. Mother was always gentle and serene in front of Father, as if she never had a temper. But in front of these portraits, she sighed one after another. I hated to see her so sad. She was even more heartbroken than I was about the end of whatever might have been between Wen Joju and me. I pointed to one of the portraits. "Mother, I want to meet this man." Mother perked up a little, then hesitated as she looked at the portrait. "This man holds the rank of a 5th-grade official. He's certainly handsome, but his mother is ill, and his family is not wealthy. He has a cold and aloof temperament, which makes him prone to making enemies. You'll have a hard life if you marry him." I gazed at the face in the portrait. "Let's just meet him. Who knows, maybe we'll be destined." Mother frowned, studying me intently for a long while before finally nodding and instructing the servants to make the arrangements. When Chen Shuyang had a day off from his official duties, we met at a tea house as arranged. He was even more handsome than his portrait suggested, though his face bore traces of weariness. He stared at me in stunned silence for a moment when he saw me. I cleared my throat softly, and he snapped out of his daze, bowing to me in greeting. We sat across from each other at the tea table. A maid poured the tea, and he kept his eyes lowered the entire time, not daring to glance in my direction. I did not speak either, and the two of us sat there in awkward silence. He was the first to break it. "The daughter of the censor is a woman of unparalleled beauty. You deserve a far better match than me. I am not worthy." He had probably been forced to come because he could not refuse my father. I smiled and raised my teacup in a toast. "It seems I am not fortunate enough to catch your excellency's eye. Still, if we cannot form a marital bond, we can at least form a friendship." Chen Shuyang looked at me in confusion. I took a jade token out of my embroidered pouch and slid it across the table toward him. "I have long heard of your excellency's filial piety, studying for the imperial examinations and working as an official while taking care of your ailing mother. Coincidentally, Dr. Lin of Xingchuan Pavilion is a close friend of my father's. This token was a gift from Dr. Lin himself. Take it to him, and he will treat your mother." Dr. Lin had once been an imperial physician. In his old age, he had resigned from the court and opened Xingchuan Pavilion in the capital to teach apprentices and practice medicine. However, he had long since retired and rarely treated patients anymore. Chen Shuyan's expression flickered, and then he looked at me warily. "Thank you for your kindness, Miss Luo. But I cannot accept such a valuable gift without doing anything to deserve it. I sighed softly. I do have a reason for wanting to form a bond with your excellency. He did not seem surprised. In fact, he looked a little more relaxed. As a censor, my father supervises all officials and has made countless enemies. He is upright and inflexible. Things may be fine now, but who knows what troubles he might face in the future. I only hope that if one day there will be someone who is willing to speak up for him. I was lying. I was being kind to him not because I wanted him to defend my father. My father had been an official for many years. He had enemies, but he also had good friends. Even if Chen Shuyang had the heart to help, there was little he could do. After all, long before my father was exiled, Chen Shuyang himself had been unjustly transferred from the capital to serve as a prefect in Yuju for offending the wrong people. Chen Shuyang was deep in thought, staring at his teacup and remaining silent for a long time. I did not rush him. I knew he was a deeply filial man. Sure enough, he picked up the jade token and raised his teacup in return. I will never forget this great kindness. With that matter settled, I put on my veil and walked out of the tea house with him. He saw me to my carriage. Before I stepped inside, I lifted a corner of the curtain and said to him, "The sun is setting, Your Excellency. Go home as soon as possible. If you ever find yourself in trouble, feel free to send a message to the Luo mansion." He nodded at me in acknowledgement. The moment before I let the curtain fall, I saw a handsome couple walking out of the building next to the tea house. The tall, slender man among them locked eyes with me from afar. Then, when Zhouju's gaze shifted to Chen Shuyang standing beside my carriage, I stepped into the carriage without a moment's hesitation. It had been half a month since I last saw Wen Zhouju, and catching sight of him now, I felt an unexpected sense of strangeness. This was for the best out of sight, out of mind. Upon returning to the mansion, I told my parents that there was no chemistry between Chen Shuyang and me, and that the matter was closed. They promptly began looking for the next suitor for me to meet. I never expected Wen Zhouju to come calling. Once upon a time, he had entered our mansion without needing to announce his arrival, but today, the gatekeeper came to ask if I would see him. I said no. The gatekeeper left, but returned shortly after. "Master Wen says he has something important to give you. He insists on seeing you." Nothing he had to offer mattered to me. I still refused to see him. This time, the gatekeeper did not come back. Before long, the patrolling servants dragged a man over and presented him before my mother and me. When Zhouju looked rather disheveled, with grass and dirt clinging to his robe's hem, he bowed respectfully to my mother. "Madam, I have something I must say to Chuchu. Please grant me this favor." My mother did not hide her displeasure. "Since you were not allowed to enter through the gate, you climbed over the wall instead. If I had refused to grant you this favor, would you have knocked me unconscious next?" A flash of embarrassment crossed Wen Zhouju's face, but he remained calm and composed. "I truly have urgent business with Miss Luo." I stared at him, my gaze probing. The word steadiness suited Wen Zhouju surprisingly well, yet the young Wen Zhouju had always been full of youthful vigor, wearing his heart on his sleeve, unable to conceal his emotions. Mother let out a cold scoff. I patted her hand. "Mother, let me talk to him for a moment." A glimmer of hope lit up in Wen Zhouju's eyes. I tilted my head, signaling for him to follow me. And we came to a stop at the octagonal pavilion in the garden. "What do you have to say to me?" He cleared his throat, fist pressed to his lips, and avoided the question. "Why is the dog hole blocked up?" Once, he had been free to come and go as he pleased in our mansion. He had found a dog hole. And as a young master from a noble family, he had not minded getting dirty. Whenever he was too lazy to walk through the main gate, he would crawl through the dog hole to find me. We had it filled in to keep thieves out. "Did you come all this way just to talk about the dog hole?" Perhaps my voice was too cold. When Zhouju's attempt to mend our relationship faltered, he pulled several sheets of paper from his bosom and laid them on the stone table. "These are profiles of promising young men I've compiled. I heard you've started meeting suitors lately. Don't rush. Marriage is a lifelong commitment. You mustn't be hasty and marry the wrong person." I stared at him in disbelief. He ignored my reaction and continued speaking. "I know you prefer good-looking men, so I've selected those with outstanding appearances. Look at this one, though he is a concubine's son, he has a resilient character and is far more promising than his legitimate elder brother. And this one, his family background is not prominent now, but he is thoughtful and meticulous. It's only a matter of time before he rises to prominence. And there's also, I recognize these men, in my past life, all of them had enjoyed successful official careers and peaceful family lives. On what grounds do you presume to meddle in my marriage? I could not help but laugh. When Joju, you are only 1 year older than me. Do you really see yourself as my elder brother? When Joju fell silent for a moment, a look of guilt crossing his face, he said, no matter what you think, I have always regarded you as my younger sister. Of course I worry about you. That Chen Shuyang you met the other day, though he is upright in character and appearance, he is far too principled. You would suffer if you married him. It would be better for you to live a stable life here in the capital, where I can look after you from time to time. I was certain now, when Joju had also been reborn, he had spoken those heart-wrenching words on his deathbed, and now he had the audacity to meddle in my affairs again. He had kept me in the dark for an entire lifetime. It was only at the very end that I learned he had never gotten over the woman he had fallen for at first sight. I could almost feel the sharp pain in my chest from that moment, the anger and resentment swelling within me, the taste of iron clogging my throat. Yet I could not voice a single word of my grievance, because he had married me to save me, and that was what had made a relationship between him and his beloved impossible. I spoke coldly, you just focus on growing old with your beloved, don't bother meddling in my business. When Joju looked flustered, pressing his fingers to his temples in frustration, even if I have someone I love, even if I get married, I could never ignore you. I retorted sharply, your words are sickening. What relationship do you and I have that obligates you to look after me? When Joju grew agitated, as if fearing I would misunderstand, and spoke without thinking, this concerns your lifelong happiness. Now is not the time for you to be jealous. We grew up together, how could I stand by and watch you ruin your life? My fingers dug into my palms. Jealous, only lovers get jealous. Why on earth would I be jealous of you? He was rendered speechless. His expression freezing in a look of stunned realization and loss. I took a deep breath, my face impassive. Since you have someone in your heart, stop leading other girls on. Doing so will only ruin 2 women's lives. When Joju stared at me, his gaze drifting away as he lost himself in thought. I knew that look all too well. After we were married, he would often stare off into the distance like this. Whenever I asked, he would claim he was pondering official business. Now, I wondered what trivial matters he was supposedly thinking about. I have my own fate to face. Whatever happens, I will accept it. I do not need you meddling in my life. When Joju snapped back to reality, looking haggard as if he had aged overnight, the vitality was gone from his eyes. His eyebrows drooping as he looked at me, helpless and dejected, he murmured softly, as if to himself, confused, you don't need me anymore. I instructed the servants to see him out at once. Along with his worthless stack of papers, when Joju left in a daze, his spirit broken, I continued meeting suitors, and several of the men when Joju had mentioned were among them. 2 months passed uneventfully, then came the news that Chen Shuyang had been assigned to Yuju. Fortunately, this time his mother did not pass away. Before his departure, he sent a message requesting to see me. He returned the jade token to me, but I refused to take it back. I gave it to you as a gift, it is yours now. Chen Shuyang shook his head slightly. I promised to speak up for Sensor Luo if the need arose, but instead, it was Sensor Luo who spoke up for me this time, and he suffered because of it. I feel ashamed to accept this token. I had only known that father had been penalized with 2 months' deduction of his salary. I had no idea it was because he had defended Chen Shuyang. There is no need for you to feel guilty, I said. My father did not defend you out of favoritism. He has always followed his own moral compass. It is in his nature to be an upright censor. Chen Shuyang smiled faintly, but his expression quickly turned to one of concern. Master Luo's integrity is both his greatest virtue and his greatest flaw. Miss Luo, if you can, please persuade Master Luo to hold his tongue more often. He lowered his voice. The capital is about to undergo a great upheaval. He did not elaborate further. But I understood perfectly well, at the end of July. General Cheng Boyuan, accused of colluding with the enemy, was escorted back to the capital as a prisoner. He was thrown into jail, sentenced to death by beheading in the autumn. In my past life, Father had believed there were discrepancies in the case and had submitted numerous memorials to the throne requesting a thorough investigation, only to have them repeatedly rejected. Father was not the only one who sensed that something was amiss, others knew it too. The general himself had known his fate from the moment the accusations arose. Though he was advanced in years, his military reputation had made him a threat to the throne. Even after he had voluntarily handed over his military power to the emperor could not rest easy. Once the frame-up began, Cheng Boyuan knew he was doomed. He had ordered his subordinates to defend the country loyally, not to stir up trouble for his sake, and not to plunge the people into the disaster of war. He had sacrificed his own life to secure peace for the nation, but my father was a man of unyielding principle. He believed that the case was suspicious, that to execute an innocent general would break the hearts of all soldiers in the army, and so he had submitted memorial after memorial to the throne. He had married me off, given mother a divorce letter, and then gone to the palace to remonstrate with the emperor. Prepared to die for his cause, he had not succeeded in sacrificing his life, but his actions had enraged the emperor, who exiled him to Yuju. Mother had sold off all our family property, given me half of the proceeds to support myself, bid me farewell, and then set off to join father in his exile. They had remained in Yuju, leaving me alone in the capital. It was father who had begged Wen Zhouju, a younger generation, to marry his daughter. In that desperate situation, it was the only way he could ensure my future. Father had acted out of love for me, when Zhouju had acted out of a sense of reluctant obligation. Father had secured my future, when Zhouju had taken care of me for the rest of my life, and so, all the anger and resentment I had felt because of his lack of love had been chained down by gratitude. I could not blame anyone. I was left with a heart full of unspeakable sorrow. This time, I had made two preparations. By befriending Chen Shuyang, I ensured that even if father was exiled to Yuju, we would have someone to look out for us there. The other preparation was to warn General Cheng Boyuan. Since the border was far away, I had secretly asked a scholar to write a story about a general whose military achievements made him a threat to the emperor, and then instructed a merchant caravan to take the story to the border and pass it on to the storytellers there. A story circulating from the capital to the border would serve as both a reminder and a warning. General Cheng had been a military commander for many years. He must have already sensed the emperor's suspicions toward him. I did not know the specifics of how he had been framed, so there was little else I could do to help him. When the day came that the news of his alleged collusion with the enemy was supposed to break, and everything remained calm, I had truly believed he might escape this fate. But barely half a month later, he was secretly escorted back to the capital as a prisoner. I realized then that I could not interfere with General Cheng's inevitable doom. I had once overheard Old Master when confiding in Wen Zhouju that the emperor intended to eliminate potential threats to pave the way for the crown prince and consolidate his hold on the throne. Whether it was the emperor's verdict now, or the crown prince rehabilitating General Cheng after ascending the throne in the future, the underlying motive was one and the same. If the ruler decrees that a minister must die, the minister has no choice but to obey. In 2 months' time, General Cheng would meet his end, and father's exile would not be far behind. Father returned home each day growing quieter and quieter, his gaze when looking at mother and me growing increasingly profound. I knew exactly what he was thinking. And I also knew that I could not stop him. Father was a loyal minister, dedicated to the state, stubborn to the point of being exasperating, and the thing mother loved most about him was his unwavering integrity. They were a perfect match, one willing to strike, the other willing to endure. Trying to dissuade them would be futile. It would be better to urge father and mother to take better care of their health, and to arrange our residence in Yuju as soon as possible, with Chen Shuyan's help. Life there would not be too difficult. Once the crown prince ascended the throne, General Cheng's case would be reopened, his reputation cleared, and father recalled to the capital. Both my parents passed away in the capital. After 8 years in Yuju, Their health had deteriorated from the bitter cold. Barely 3 years after returning, they breathed their last. If their days in Yuju had been more comfortable, with proper care, they might have lived longer. My frequent correspondence with Chen Shuyang convinced my parents that there was affection between us. I couldn't defend myself. After discussing it, they acknowledged that Chen Shuyang was a good man. But Yuju was far too distant. They refused to let me marry so far away and ordered me to cut off contact with him. Father grew even more anxious to arrange a match for me. Once, he'd been the one who least wanted me to marry young. But now he was eager for me to find a good husband as soon as possible. I went along with his arrangements, yet found a flaw in every suitor he presented, refusing to marry any of them. It drove father to pull out handfuls of hair and break out in blisters on his tongue if I didn't marry. Mother couldn't rest easy seeing me settled down, and he couldn't make proper arrangements for both of us. Unaware of his urgency, mother brewed him calming herbal tea every day to soothe his stress. I secretly kept in touch with Chen Shuyang, smuggling medicinal herbs and tonics from the capital to him in Yuju. Father caught me red-handed while I was sending a letter. He was so furious he had to lean against the wall for support. "What on earth do you see in that stubborn fool?" he demanded. I cleared my throat lightly. "It's not that I fancy him, it's just that he reminds me of you." Father hesitated, opening his mouth to scold me, then clamped it shut again, hands behind his back. Trying to stand tall in authority but unable to find the words, the air turned awkward. I waited for him to berate me, but he didn't know how. Mother let out a chuckle. "Our Choo-Choo has inherited my good taste in men." Father snorted and stormed off to his study. Mother and I snickered behind his back when the gatekeeper arrived with an announcement. "Madam, Miss." His expression was indescribably strange. "The Wens have come to propose marriage." I thought I'd misheard. Glancing at Mother reflexively, she looked equally bewildered. A crowd had already gathered outside the main gate. Old Master Wen was leading a matchmaker, with servants carrying betrothal gifts behind them. When Joju stood beside his father, head bowed, silent, Mother put on a cold, forced smile, not inviting them in, and asked directly, "What is the meaning of this, Old Master Wen?" Old Master Wen's smile was strained. He must have remembered the earlier incident. "Choo-Choo has grown up. I've come to propose marriage on behalf of my worthless son." Mother shot a glance at Wen Joju's pale face. "If I didn't know you were here to propose, I'd think Master Wen was here seeking medical treatment." When Joju locked eyes with me, his voice steady and emotionless. "I willingly ask for the hand of Miss Luo Minchu in marriage. I beg Mr. and Mrs. Luo to grant me this favor." Father emerged from his study, standing beside Mother, and said to Old Master Wen, "You've come too late." He smiled faintly. "My daughter's marriage has already been promised to someone else." The color drained from Wen Joju's face instantly. His voice cracked with urgency. "Who is she marrying?" Father gave him a dismissive look. "Naturally, a good man. You needn't trouble yourself with Choo-Choo's marriage any longer." Wen Joju stared at me in utter disbelief, his face a picture of shock. Old Master Wen, humiliated, tried to yank his son away, but when Joju stood rooted to the spot, Father told the matchmaker to leave, leaving the betrothal gifts outside the gate, and invited Old Master Wen in for tea and a chat. "I've long heard that Adu has taken a fancy to a young lady," he said casually as he led the way. "Why haven't we heard any good news yet? Adu is not getting any younger. Don't stand in his way. Stop thinking of Choo-Choo as your daughter-in-law. She knows her own mind. And I can't control her." Old Master Wen wore a look of bitter helplessness, forced to swallow his grievances. Mother played along with Father, adding smoothly, "You and Choo-Choo grew up together like siblings. Once she marries, you'll hardly be able to see each other again." Following behind Mother, I could feel Wen Joju's gaze burning into my back. Just before I stepped into the main hall, someone grabbed my wrist. When Joju pulled me aside to a quiet, secluded spot, I wrenched my hand free. Waiting for him to speak, he hesitated, lost for words, and my patience wore thin. "I thought you were in love with Miss Chen," I asked point-blank, after we'd parted ways at the Lantern Festival. My focus had been entirely on my family. I'd made no effort to inquire about his affairs, and knew probably less about them than my parents did. Given how he'd pined for Chen Yuyao for an entire lifetime in my past life, why was he here proposing to me now, when Zhouju spoke in a hoarse voice? I thought I would end up with her too. I sat down on a stone railing, my tone calm and even. So I've heard, you fell for her at first sight at the Lantern Festival. Later, you even asked your father to propose on your behalf and invited her out many times. I thought you'd marry before me. When Zhouju looked up at me, Choo-choo, don't you care at all? The lighter my tone, the heavier his voice became. I smiled. Care about what? You've always seen me as your little sister. And I've always seen you as my elder brother. Of course I'd wish you happiness on your marriage. When Zhouju closed his eyes, a look of agony crossing his face. That's not true. What's not true? He took a deep breath. I never saw you as my sister. His words were as firm as when he'd once claimed the exact opposite. Suddenly, he bent down, grasping my arms with both hands, his gaze intense as he stared into my eyes. Choo-choo, you're supposed to marry me. My smile faded. What about Miss Chen? When Zhouju answered without hesitation, she has her own fate, but her destiny does not lie with me. I froze for a moment. I knew that on that Lantern Festival night, it wasn't just when Zhouju who'd fallen for Chen Yuyao, there had been another man. He was a fine match too. While when Zhouju had been carrying me, injured, to the clinic, that other man had already taken the initiative to approach Chen Yuyao, by the time when Zhouju had gone to find her. Another man's shadow had already taken root in her heart, so in my past life, when Zhouju had been one step too late, even without me in the way this time, had he still missed his chance? Did you get rejected by Miss Chen, and now you've come running back to me? No, when Zhouju denied immediately, his expression grave and earnest. Choo-choo, believe me, I know that your parents will be exiled to Yuju in the future. Only by marrying me can you stay in the capital. We can grow old together just like we did in our past life. I let out a soft exclamation, my tone devoid of emotion. Sacrificing your own happiness for me. No wonder you looked so miserable just now. When Zhouju's expression stiffened, a flicker of conflict crossing his eyes. But he didn't refute it. Instead, he asked anxiously, it's nothing compared to you. Just now, Uncle Luo said you've already promised yourself to someone else. Who is he? Is he in the capital? Is he reliable? I didn't answer his questions, countering instead, how do you know my parents will be exiled to Yuju? If you marry me, you'll never have a chance with Miss Chen again. When Zhouju lowered his eyes slightly, you might not believe me, Choo-choo, but I've been reborn too. Uncle will anger the emperor by submitting memorials for General Cheng Boyuan. Aunt will go with him to Yuju. In our past life, you escaped this fate only because you married me beforehand. He paused, then added quietly. As for Miss Chen, in the end, we were never meant to be. I couldn't help but laugh. Don't trouble yourself with sacrificing your happiness. I'm willing to go to Yuju. He frowned. Don't be foolish. That bitter cold wasteland is no place for a joke. I finally confessed the truth to him. Do you think the reason we've grown so distant now is simply because you chose to stay away from me? He stared at me, stunned. I let out a faint, mocking laugh. I've been avoiding you too. When Zhouju. I wanted you to fulfill your last wish. When Zhouju's face turned even paler than it had been at the mansion gate, he stared at me in bewilderment. Last wish? Yes, this time, you don't have to sacrifice anything for me. I won't be a burden to you. When Zhouju looked completely shattered, staring at me in a daze, he took 2 unsteady steps forward, stumbling over his words in his haste to explain. No, that's not it. He grabbed my wrist again. I don't want you to fulfill any wish for me. Choo-choo, let's just go back to how we were in our past life. I was happy that way. If you were truly happy, you wouldn't have looked so miserable when you proposed just now. I looked like that only because, he struggled to find the right words. Desperate to defend himself but unable to articulate his feelings, I pulled my wrist free again. That's enough. This is where we draw the line. I turned and walked back toward the main hall. Behind me, he whispered, his voice trembling with confusion. Don't you love me anymore? I heard his words, but I didn't answer. In our past life, he'd married me out of kindness. In this life, I refused to marry him out of mine. As for the question he'd asked, I decided I would tell him the answer only when I was on my deathbed. But I suspected I would live a very long time. He'd died at the age of 40. After he took his last breath, I'd swallowed poison. I couldn't remember if the searing pain had been in my heart or my stomach, only the taste of blood filling my mouth, and the overwhelming thought that he'd loved someone else his entire life. In this life, I wanted nothing more than to die in peace. Father stopped pressuring me to meet suitors, instead waiting anxiously for a letter, asking the servants every few days if it had arrived. During this time, I went to Xingchuan Pavilion to assist Dr. Lin's disciples. Borrowing many of their medical manuscripts to study, Dr. Lin's disciples were all skilled physicians. Out of respect for my father, they were willing to teach me a thing or two. My greatest worry about going to Yuju was my parents' health. The long, arduous journey and harsh environment would take their toll. Even though I knew from my past life that they would survive, I couldn't help but fret. I was so busy I barely had time to come home. Father was still busy advocating for General Cheng, leaving Mother alone in the mansion most days. She began to sense that something was wrong. I seemed my usual self, but Father had grown increasingly distant toward her, for several days in a row. He'd even taken to sleeping in his study instead of their bedroom. Privately, she came to me, asking if I knew what he was so preoccupied with. I pulled her straight to Father's side. He was writing something, and when he saw us enter, he froze for a moment, instinctively covering the paper he was working on. Quick as a flash, I snatched the paper away. It was a lengthy document, the handwriting growing smaller and smaller toward the end, but no matter how long it was a divorce letter. Mother's eyes reddened instantly. She tore the letter to shreds and slapped Father across the face. "Luo Juan, what do you think you're doing?" Father clutched his cheek, stammering, "Divorce." He received another slap for his words. I stepped back silently, listening as Mother roared, "Say that again." Father fell silent. I turned to him. "Even a divorce needs a reason." "Why, Father?" Father held his stinging cheeks in both hands and sighed deeply. "I have my reasons, of course. Speak." Mother glared at him fiercely. Father pressed his lips together, seemingly torn. He looked at Mother's face and shook his head slightly. "You only need to know that this divorce is for the good of you and our daughter." My palms itched with frustration. But he was my father. I couldn't bring myself to hit him. Thankfully, Mother did not hold back. She struck him again. "You say it's for our good. Do I think it's good?" Slap after slap landed on Father's shoulders and back. He hunched his neck, not daring to dodge. All right, I'll tell you." Only then did Mother stop hitting him. Father let out another heavy sigh. "General Cheng has been wronged. I intend to plead his case before the Emperor. But His Majesty's mind is made up. If I insist on opposing his will." Mother froze. She stared at Father for a long time, then finally turned to look at me as if she had made up her mind about something. She pulled out a blank sheet of paper, placed it on the table, and handed Father a brush. "Write another divorce letter." My heart jolted. I stared at her in shock. She said to Father, "I will take good care of Choo-Choo. You go and do what you must without worry." The plaque hanging above the Luo mansion was taken down and replaced with one that read "By Mansion." By was Mother's maiden surname. Mother registered herself as the head of a household of women and took me to live there, with Father pulling strings at the civil registry office. The official documents were processed in no time. Father left the family mansion to Mother and me, renting a small room for himself elsewhere. He had made his choice, and now he would walk that path alone. As General Cheng Boyuan's execution date drew near, Mother grew thinner and more silent with each passing day. I tried to comfort her, telling her not to worry, that Father would be safe. She only took it as empty consolation. Finally, the day came when Father was arrested and thrown into prison. Mother cried all night long. In this time of crisis, no one dared to associate with our family. A few days later, however, I began receiving private letters. All those suitors I had met earlier, though I had not formed any attachments, I had made a point of keeping friendly relations with them. They couldn't do much to help, but they could pass along some inside information. Their messages all carried the same gist. Father would endure some hardships in prison, but his life would not be in danger. I breathed a small sigh of relief. I bribed the jailers to bring Father warm quilts and decent meals, making sure not to let Mother come along. The sight of him looking disheveled and haggard would have broken her heart. Father did not let me stay long in the prison. He told me all about mother's little habits, urging me to take good care of her, every word sounding like a final farewell. When a person faces the prospect of death, the ones they cannot bear to leave behind become crystal clear. When I walked out of the prison, I stood by the roadside in a daze. The air was thick with misty rain, and I could barely tell where reality ended and dreams began. Then a carriage pulled up beside me. When Joju climbed down and held an umbrella over my head, I stared at his face. Raindrops slid down his cheeks like tears. "It's raining," he said. "Why are you standing here alone?" Concern shone plainly in his eyes. I snapped out of my daze, pulled my gaze away from him, and stepped out from under his umbrella, opening my own. When Joju walked beside me, "Do you really intend to go to Yuju, that bitter, freezing land? How do you think your body will stand it?" I replied distractedly. "If father and mother can endure it, so can I." He grabbed my wrist, forcing me to stop walking. His voice was filled with helplessness. "Chuchu, this is no time to be stubborn. Marry me. And you won't have to go through any of this. Don't be foolish, I'm doing this for your own good." I glanced over his shoulder. "Miss Chen, what are you doing here?" When Joju's eyes widened in surprise, he turned around instinctively and I wrenched my wrist free, hurrying to climb into my family's waiting carriage. I didn't want to hear another word about how he was doing this for my own good. In the end, father was indeed sentenced to exile in Yuju. Mother and I sold off most of our remaining possessions, hiring a carriage and bodyguards for the journey, and giving generous bribes to the officials in charge of escorting father. As we passed through the city gates, I noticed an extra figure had joined the exile procession. Mother tugged at my sleeve. "Chuchu, look." When Joju was riding a horse, following behind our carriage, I had no idea what he thought he was doing. He didn't come forward to speak to me, and I didn't go to him. When mother told him to go back to the capital, he merely said he had business in Yuju that needed attending to. The journey lasted 2 months. We crossed paths with him many times along the way. Each time, he would look at me silently, then quickly avert his gaze, leaving me wondering what was going through his mind. When we finally reached the gates of Yuju, when Joju rode his horse up to our carriage and rapped on the wooden side, through the carriage walls, I heard his voice. "I've been thinking about this the entire way here. I think I owe you an explanation." I did not lift the carriage curtain. It was already bitterly cold outside. "I couldn't stop wondering who you would marry," he began, his voice steady, as if he had been rehearsing these words for a long time. "Even when I deliberately avoided seeing you, I still found myself worrying about whether you would suffer if you married someone else. I thought about you constantly, and yet I kept telling myself that I only saw you as a sister." After the Lantern Festival, I asked Chen Yuyao out many times, but whenever I was with her, your name kept popping into my head. Once, I even accidentally called her Chuchu. When I saw her smiling at other men, I felt nothing, not even a flicker of jealousy. It was nothing compared to the anger I felt when I saw Chen Shuyang seeing you to your carriage that day. And after that anger came panic. Why was I so furious at the thought of you being with another man? I was supposed to like Chen Yuyao. She was supposed to be the one I loved. That's why I went out of my way to find all those eligible young men for you, so I could convince myself that my feelings for you were nothing more than brotherly affection. But the more I saw Chen Yuyao, the more something felt wrong. When she told me that she had fallen for someone else, I felt a huge sense of relief. I was actually relieved. He spoke in a rush, without pausing, as if he was finally unburdening himself of words he had kept locked away for far too long. Mother squeezed my hand, looking at me with a complicated expression. The city gates creaked open. Someone was waiting for us there. The escort officials were invited to go rest. And father was handed over to a new team of guards. When Joju's voice fell silent, outside the carriage, a familiar voice called out, "Madame Luo, Miss Luo." I lifted the carriage curtain. There stood Chen Shuyang, dressed in his official robes, standing in the snow. His eyes met mine. "Long time no see," he said. I smiled and echoed his words. When Joju reined in his horse, cutting himself off mid-sentence, the carriage and the horse were no more than 3 steps apart. But between when Joju and me lay the distance of 2 lifetimes. I climbed down from the carriage and followed Wenjoju to a quiet spot by the roadside. The icy wind rushed into my mouth the moment I opened it, stinging my lips and tongue. I wondered how Wenjoju had managed to speak so much just now. He was wrapped in thick layers, but his clothes looked noticeably more plain and worn than before. The youthful vigor that had once defined him was gone, replaced by a quiet melancholy. Wenjoju gazed at me, his eyes dark and heavy, reminding me of the man he had been in our past life. Suddenly, it felt as though that previous lifetime was nothing but a distant memory, far removed from who I was now. I could no longer recall the searing pain that had once consumed me. "You moved on a long time ago, arranging your own way out," he said, his voice tinged with bitterness. "I was so foolish to think that only I could save you." He glanced at Chen Shuyang, who stood not far away, and let out a self-deprecating laugh. "I refused to admit that I had wasted all those years I should have spent loving you truly. I needed a reason to be with you that wasn't love. Even on the day I came to propose marriage, even on the day I waited for you outside the prison gates, I was still deceiving myself, avoiding everything that had happened between us, refusing to acknowledge that I alone was to blame for how things ended between us." His voice dropped to a murmur, barely audible above the wind. "But the one I love is you, Choo-Choo. I was so slow, so hypocritical and cowardly. That's why I lost you, isn't it?" Chen Yuyao had said he was a man of contradictions. This, I realized, was the root of his confusion. I stared down at the snow-covered ground. It looked pure and pristine, but who knew what rotten grass and filth lay hidden beneath its white surface? I blinked, pulling my hat tighter around my ears, and said, "Wenjoju, you call yourself hypocritical and cowardly. I can't answer that for you, because no matter how you see yourself, the fact remains that in our past life, I was the one who benefited from your actions. I have no right to blame you." He had always wanted too much. He had thought the things he could not have were the most precious, never realizing that what he held in his hands was not so bad. It simply wasn't enough to satisfy his longing for the unattainable. He continued to gaze at me, his eyes filled with sorrow. "Let us say that we were never meant to be. What's done is done, and we've missed our chance." I stood up, stepping away from him to put some distance between us. "Thank you for escorting us this far. This is where we part ways. In this lifetime, we will each go our own way and live in peace." I thought of the question he had asked me earlier, the one I had planned to leave unanswered for years, just to keep him hanging. Now, it seemed pointless to hold on to that petty grudge. "Wenjoju," I said, looking him straight in the eye, "it's true, I don't love you anymore." Wenjoju returned to the capital, mother, and I moved into the residence Chen Shuyang had prepared for us. It was fully furnished, warm and cozy, and located not far from the place where father was forced to work. Chen Shuyang visited us from time to time, but most of the time, he only spoke to mother. I had the distinct feeling that he was avoiding me. It seemed he truly was a filial man, dutiful to his own mother, and kind to other people's mothers as well. Mother, however, remembered the frequent letters Chen Shuyang and I had exchanged. She made a point of creating opportunities for us to be alone together. A coal fire burned brightly in the hearth, filling the room with warmth. Mother was in the kitchen helping the cook prepare dinner. She wouldn't let me assist, telling me to stay and entertain Chen Shuyang instead. I brought out some dried fruits and placed them in front of him. He sat up straight as a rod, as if there was a ruler pressed against his back. He still wouldn't meet my eyes. I popped a dried fruit into my mouth, crunching it loudly, just like the first time we had met. Neither of us spoke a word. Once again, he was the first to break the silence. "Miss Luo, is what Uncle Luo wrote in his letter true?" I froze. Father had written to him. A faint flush spread across Chen Shuyan's cheeks, no doubt from the heat of the fire. "Some things are hard to put into words in a letter," he explained. "That's why I wanted to ask you in person, if I had the chance." He suddenly looked incredibly earnest, his eyes locking onto mine. "Miss Luo, is it true that you have feelings for me, and wish to form a bond with me?" I was so caught off guard that I crushed the dried fruit in my hand. "What did father write to you? That sneaky old man, always meddling in my affairs behind my back." Chen Shuyang seemed to sense my surprise. He paused for a moment before answering. "Uncle Luo wrote that if you and I are truly compatible, there would be no reason to oppose our union. But he also said that I should do my best to get transferred back to the capital. He frowned, looking somewhat confused, an odd expression for a man who had been an official for so many years. But now that you've come to Yuju, do I still need to go back to the capital? It was only then that his earlier words sank in. Compatible. I knew father had misunderstood my relationship with Chen Shuyang, but I had no idea he would go so far as to suggest marriage. The fire must have been burning too hot. Chen Shuyang pressed his lips together, his blush deepening, even without saying a word. His face told me everything I needed to know. I felt flustered, at a loss for what to say. But I'm the daughter of a disgraced official. He spoke softly, his voice gentle and sincere. I know exactly who you are. I looked up at him. His eyes were warm, and there was a faint smile playing on his lips. You are a wonderful person. I knew it from the moment I first met you. And the longer I've known you, the more I've come to appreciate just how wonderful you are. My throat felt dry. I picked up my teacup and took a sip of water. The room still felt too warm. I walked over to open the window, letting a gust of cold wind rush in and brush against my face. Chen Shuyang remained seated, not moving an inch. I stared out the window, unable to find the right words to say. Mother entered the room, carrying a tray of dishes. Chen Shuyang jumped to his feet at once to help her. We finished the meal in silence, neither of us saying anything more about the elephant in the room. When it was time for him to leave, Mother told me to walk him to the entrance of the alley. We walked side by side in silence for a while before he spoke up. I didn't give Uncle Luo an answer. I wanted to ask you first, to see if you were willing, but if what I've said has made you uncomfortable, then. He let out a soft sigh. Pretend I never said anything at all. He clutched the jade pendant at his waist, pressing his lips together and falling silent once more. We reached his carriage. He looked into my eyes. Until we meet again, Miss Luo. I watched as he climbed into the carriage and rode away, disappearing into the distance. I turned and walked back home, my mind replaying his words over and over again. Pretend he never said anything. But he would say it again, someday, wouldn't he? I buried my mouth and nose into my scarf, tucking my chin down to shield my face from the cold. The bright moonlight illuminated my path home. Then we would talk about it someday. Barring any unexpected twists of fate, I knew I would have plenty of time to get to know him better. I could make a good life for myself here in Yuju, and when the day came for us to return to the capital, I would carve out a place for myself there as well. The future stretched out before me, long and full of possibilities. There was plenty of time.